They stood proudly on stage, Nora in her crisp black gown, a law degree in hand, and Ella in a shimmering dress, snapping photos for her millions of followers. The crowd clapped, cameras flashed. Then came the moment the host asked, "And who's that with you?" Nora smiled and waved toward the older woman in the back row. "Oh, that's the woman who used to help out when things were tough." Just like that, no name, no title, no truth. Not Big Sister. Not the woman who gave up her youth to raise us. Not the one who sold her gold chain so we could eat. She had raised them like her own daughters, held their hands through night fevers and exam jitters, watched from the shadows as they climbed every step of the ladder she built. And now she was introduced like a forgotten cleaner. She didn't argue. She didn't cry, not there. She just lowered her head and smiled politely. But her heart shattered into a silence. Only the deeply betrayed understand. What they didn't know was that someone else was watching. Someone small. Someone with a notebook. Her niece. And when she stood up to read her truth aloud, everything changed. You won't believe what happened next, or what it cost them. Have ever poured your life into someone, fed them, prayed for them, clothed them only to be erased from their story when the lights came on? Stay with me on this story. Because this isn't just about family. It's about truth. It's about sacrifice. It's about what happens when the ones you raised decide to forget your name on purpose. Like, share, comment if you've ever felt invisible in a place you helped build. This story will speak for you. Kiyomaka was only 19 when her entire world folded in one silent, cruel moment. It happened on a Sunday. Her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Nwokoi, were returning from a wedding in Enugu when their bus skidded off the wet road and collided with a trailer. There were no survivors. The news came like a slap across the face. Neighbors whispered, distant relatives wept, but when the dust settled, the only thing left was responsibility. Heavy, immediate, non-negotiable. She had no time to grieve. Her younger sisters, Nora and Ella, stood on either side of her in oversized funeral clothes. Nora was just 12, old enough to understand the depth of what was lost, while little Ella, only 5, kept asking when Mama was coming back to braid her hair. From that day, Kiyomaka was no longer just a sister. She was a provider, a decision-maker, a shield. She had just received her admission letter to study nursing at the University of Nigeria. The envelope still sat unopened on the shelf beside their parents' framed wedding photo. She never touched it again. Instead, she took up a nanny job for a pastor's family on her street, earning just enough to keep the lights on. During the day, she scrubbed floors and washed uniforms for other households. On weekends, she borrowed a friend's cooler and sold jollof rice and fried plantain at the bus park. She did whatever it took. While Nora and Ella slept on their late parents' bed, Kiyomaka spread a wrapper on the cold floor beside them each night. She made sure their uniforms were ironed, their school bags packed, and their stomachs full if it meant skipping meals herself. When Nora's WAEC form was due and there was no money in sight, Kiyomaka did something she'd sworn never to dosh, opened her mother's jewelry box. Inside was the last thing of value they had, a delicate gold chain their mother wore only on special occasions. Kiyomaka sold it. The money wasn't much, but it paid for Nora's registration, a pair of black shoes, and even a small scientific calculator. When Nora got her results and passed all her subjects, Kiyomaka cried. Not out of pride but exhaustion, relief. She had kept her first promise. And she didn't stop there. She braided Ella's hair for school, taught her how to spell butterfly, and held her close on nights the child woke up crying for Mama. She bought a second-hand tablet with her food stall savings just so Ella could practice phonics. When teachers at Ella's school praised how sharp the child was, they had no idea Kiyomaka stayed up every night, whispering lessons by candlelight. No one clapped for her. No one asked how she managed. But Kiyomaka carried on quietly, fiercely. She became mother, father, sister, and protector, the neighbors would later say. She gave them everything. And though her friends were getting married, traveling abroad, and posting selfies in lecture halls, Kiyomaka stayed back, stayed grounded. Her shoes wore thin, her clothes stayed the same. But she never let her sisters go hungry. Not once. She made sure of it. Because somewhere deep inside, she believed that if she just kept pushing, her time would come. She believed that one day, when they were grown, they would look back and remember who held the roof over their heads when the rain started. But she didn't know yet that some people forget. Worse still, some pretend. And the silence of ingratitude can sometimes hit harder than the crash that took her parents. Years passed, and true to Chiamaka's prayer and labor, her sisters blossomed. Nora graduated from law school with second-class upper and landed a job at a reputable firm in Abuja. She wore power suits, now navy, cream, charcoalant. Her hair was always pressed straight and tucked neatly behind her ears. Her words became polished, her voice lower. She spoke of mergers and strategy, like someone who had forgotten what pepper stew smelled like in the morning. Ella, on the other hand, took a very different path. After secondary school, she began documenting her life online makeup routines, thrift hauls, glow-up transitions. By 23, she had over 500, 0 followers. Her captions were always bold, confident. Self-made babe, one post read, beneath a photo of her sipping iced coffee in a silk robe. Chiamaka was proud at first. She followed every post, every milestone. She kept a folder of their graduation photos. Told neighbors, "My girls are doing well." Even printed out Nora's first byline in the Daily Verdict and framed it. But something had shifted. Invitations stopped coming. Birthdays became private brunches. Launches were invite-only. Even Sunday calls turned into hurried voice notes. One Wednesday afternoon, Chiamaka stopped by Nora's office during her break. She had made a pot of vegetable soup and wanted to surprise her with some. She stood in the polished waiting area, clutching the container wrapped in a cloth. A receptionist barely older than Ella gave her a side glance. "Name?" she asked. "Just tell her it's Chiamaka," she said, smiling. The receptionist hesitated, then disappeared behind a glass door. 20 minutes passed. Finally, a junior associate came out. "Madam Nora says she's in a meeting. Maybe you can drop it at security?" Chiamaka nodded, her smile fading slightly. "All right, just tell her I stopped by." She turned and walked out slowly, soup still warm in her hands. That night, she scrolled through Instagram and saw Nora tagged at a rooftop wine tasting, smiling, free. She didn't call. Then came Ella's photos, carefully edited memories. Childhood throwbacks of her and Nora holding each other cropped tightly, always just the two of them. One post even read, "From rough beginnings to soft lives, it's always been you and me." Chiamaka looked closer. She remembered that photo. She was in it, right next to them. But now, she was missing, cropped out like an unwanted border. She didn't say anything. Not to Ella, not to Nora. She just kept scrolling, until she stopped on the comments. One read, "Oh, just you two? I heard you had an older sister?" Ella replied, "Oh, just an older cousin who stayed back to help out a bit. But it's always been Nora and me." Chiamaka read it twice. Her chest tightened, but she exhaled slowly. She smiled. A tired, empty smile. She wasn't angry. She didn't even feel hurt in the usual way. It was something else, something colder. A quiet disappointment that settled deep, like dust behind a locked cupboard. She had raised them like her own, given up her future so theirs could shine. And now, they introduced her like a passing guest in the story they retold to the world. Still, Chiamaka went to work the next morning as usual, wore her clean uniform, packed food for the pupils at the school where she worked as a matron. She tucked her hair under her scarf and hummed while stirring ogbono soup in the staff kitchen. No one knew what she carried inside, because some betrayals don't come with shouting or slammed doors. Some arrive with silence and are felt the most by the ones who remember everything. The invitation didn't come from either of her sisters. It came from a former neighbor, now a journalist, who had seen Chiamaka at the market and mentioned that Nora and Ella were being honored at a high-profile awards and graduation ceremony. "They're part of a youth excellence panel. Law, media, digital influence. Your girls are flying high," the woman said proudly. Chiamaka nodded with a soft smile. "Yes, they've worked hard." The woman offered her a spare guest pass. "I think you should be there." Chiamaka wasn't sure. She had nothing fancy to wear, no makeup to glam her up, but something inside her told her to go, just to see. so she put on her best wrapper and a neatly ironed blouse. She carried her small black purse and touched up her brows the way Ella once taught her, back when they used to sit on the same mattress and share a mirror. She arrived early, hoping to find a good seat, but the usher glanced at her pass, smiled, and led her to a row near the back, far from the lights, far from the stage. From where she sat, she could barely make out Nora and Ella, radiant under the spotlight. Nora's speech was eloquent about resilience, dreams, and community. Ella gave a talk about rising from tough beginnings and building personal brands with grit and vision. No one mentioned Chiamaka. When the event ended, the mingling began. Sponsors, press, and influencers filled the hall. Chiamaka approached slowly, hands folded over her purse. Her heart beat faster as she reached them. "Hi," she said softly. Nora turned, surprised. "Oh, you made it." Ella gave her a quick hug and then pulled back. "Oh, Auntie Chi, you look simple." One of the event hosts walked up. "Are you their mum?" Before Chiamaka could respond, Nora cut in with a polished laugh. "Oh, no, she's just someone who helped us when things were hard. We're grateful for her." Ella nodded quickly, smiled at the camera, then gently pulled Chiamaka away from the crowd. "Let's not confuse the press, Auntie," she whispered. Chiamaka froze for a moment, then nodded. "I understand," she said. She stepped back, gave a small wave, and watched them disappear into the center of attention. She took a few quiet photos on her phone from the shadows blurry, but still precious. Then she left. She didn't cry in front of them. She didn't shout or collapse. She simply stepped into the cool evening breeze, hailed a keke, and rode home in silence. But inside, she bled. Not from their words, but from how effortlessly they had rewritten her place in their story. The woman who stayed when no one else did. Who fed them when she couldn't feed herself? Who became their roof when the sky caved in? Now labeled just someone who helped out. And as the city lights passed by her window, Chiamaka whispered to herself, "So this is how you disappear in plain sight." Exactly 1 week after the ceremony, Ella dropped her daughter, 8-year-old Zara, off at Chiamaka's home for the weekend. She had a content shoot lined up and didn't want any interruptions. Zara always loved visiting Auntie Chi. There were no rules about tablet time or perfect posture, just quiet mornings, hot bread from the roadside bakery, and the warmth of a woman who didn't talk much but somehow made you feel like the only person in the world. That Saturday evening, as Chiamaka braided Zara's hair by the window, the little girl looked up and asked, "Auntie Chi, why do people pretend in public?" Chiamaka paused. The breeze from the window fluttered a loose thread on her wrapper. She gently pulled it off, tied the braid tighter, and said nothing. Zara didn't ask again. But the question hung in the air like perfume, soft, lingering, and impossible to ignore. What Chiamaka didn't know was that Zara had been listening that day at the award event. She had seen her mother's rushed hug, heard Nora's laughter when they called Chiamaka someone who helped, watched her aunt take pictures from the back row. She had watched and remembered. So when Literacy Week came at school and the teacher asked the students to write about someone they admired most, Zara didn't hesitate. She titled her essay, "The Real Mother in Our Family." In her crooked but careful handwriting, she wrote, "Everyone says I have 2 aunties and 1 mummy, but I think I have 2 mummies. Auntie Chi is not just my mummy's sister. She is the real mother in our family. She wakes up early, makes hot tea, and prays for us. My mummy says she's a helper, but I know she's a hero. She raised my mummy when she was small. She bought her books when she had no job. She is the reason my mummy can post pictures and wear makeup. But nobody claps for her. I want to clap for her." The day of the event arrived. Parents, teachers, and invited guests filled the school hall. One by one, children went up to recite poems, short stories, and tongue twisters. Then Zara's name was called. She walked up in her school uniform, notebook in hand, and stood behind the small podium. Her voice trembled slightly at first, but by the second paragraph, the room fell silent. She read every word clearly, every sentence sharp like a blade wrapped in ribbons. When she finished, there was a pause, thick and quiet. Then came the claps, not polite ones, not routine, but loud, emotional, gut-level applause. Some mothers wiped their eyes. The principal stood. Even a guest speaker leaned forward and whispered, "Who is this Auntie Chi?" One of the teachers recorded the entire presentation and uploaded it to the school's Facebook page. Another parent reposted it on Twitter. By nightfall, the video had gathered over 40,000 views. By morning, it crossed 500,000. The caption read, "This little girl just exposed what real sacrifice looks like. Where are the aunties she mentioned?" The comments came flooding in. "This is the kind of child we need in this generation. Auntie She, wherever you are seen. The sisters should be ashamed. You don't step on the ladder that raised you. Who else is crying?" Screenshots of Zara's essay spread across social media. Someone found Kiyomaka's old photo with the girls in school uniforms and matched it to Ella's current influencer page. And just like that, the internet did what the family refused to do. It put Kiyomaka back into the story where she had always belonged. By the second morning, the video of Zara's essay had crossed 1 million views. What began as a quiet school event had become a digital thunderstorm. Screenshots of her words flooded Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. But it wasn't just the essay that caught attention, it was the truth behind it. Online users began digging. They found old pictures. Blurry, warm-toned images of 3 girls, Kiyomaka in the middle, arms around little Nora and Ella standing in front of a modest bungalow. The caption on one photo read, "My girls, we're still standing." People started putting the pieces together. Wait, that's the influencer's sister? No, that's the woman who raised them. Look at the dates. Look at the uniforms. A popular blogger joined the wave and published a piece titled, "The Ghost in Their Story, Who Really Raised Nora and Ella." The article included an official record, Kiyomaka Nwokoye, listed as legal guardian on Nora's school admission file from 2009. There were receipts of exam payments made in her name. Even the WAEC registration tied to Kiyomaka's personal account. The backlash was swift and brutal. Ella's world cracked first. Brands began pulling back. Her email inbox filled with subject lines like, "Termination of partnership," "Suspension of campaign," "Request for clarification." One skincare label dropped her within 24 hours. We cannot be associated with narratives that contradict our core values of honesty and authenticity. Her influencer income took a direct hit. Sponsored posts vanished. Comments under her Instagram reels flipped overnight from "Slay Queen" to "Where's your Auntie Chi?" Then came Nora's reckoning. Her law firm was tagged repeatedly in viral tweets. Past clients began asking questions. How does someone erase their legal guardian from their story and still talk about justice? 3 clients requested transfers to other lawyers. One corporate client pulled a full retainer, citing brand risk. A formal letter came from management. "You are advised to address these allegations publicly. Integrity is not optional in this field." Nora's sleek confidence began to unravel. She disabled comments on her posts. Ella deactivated her Twitter. But it was too late. Social media had already made up its mind. Stop packaging lies for aesthetics. You forgot who boiled water for your baths, but posted cappuccinos in Paris. Kiyomaka is the reason you both stand today. Fix your mouth and say the truth. Success without gratitude is just a decorated shame. In just 3 days, the image Nora and Ella had built with filters and hashtags was reduced to dust. And through it all, Kiyomaka remained silent. No interviews, no statements. She simply returned to work at the school, tied her scarf, and kept doing what she had always done, taking care of others while the world finally began to take notice of her. 2 weeks later, the same school that unknowingly launched a national conversation hosted another event, this time in honor of Kiyomaka. The flyer read, "A woman of quiet strength, celebrating the real heroes among us." Teachers wore head wraps in her honor. Parents whispered about her grace. Even the local radio station sent a small crew to cover the event. Children made hand-drawn cards with messages like, "Thank you for not giving up," and "You're the real mummy." Kiyomaka arrived in her usual way simple ankara, a calm expression, and her scarf tied just right. She held Zara's hand tightly as they walked into the hall. The applause that followed her entrance was louder than anything she had ever experienced. But the biggest surprise hadn't arrived yet. Midway through the program, as the school principal gave a moving speech about sacrifice, the doors at the back opened. In walked Nora and Ella. No entourage, no designer bags, just humility written plainly on their faces. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Cameras turned. They didn't ask for permission. They simply walked to the front past the seated guests, past the camerasan knelt on stage in front of Chiamaka. Nora spoke first. Her voice cracked before the first sentence finished. "We didn't just lose a sister. We tried to bury our mother." Ella wiped her eyes, mascara running. "You gave everything. We gave you silence. You made us women. And we tried to erase you like a smudge in our success story." The room was still. No one blinked. Even Zara held her breath. Chiamaka stood slowly. She looked at them not with anger, but with something deeper, something steadier. She reached out, gently lifted their shoulders, and said quietly, "I already forgave you, but some wounds don't close overnight, and some roads, we walk alone." They hugged her. The room erupted into applause. But Chiamaka didn't stay long after. She accepted her plaque, smiled for the photos, and left with her dignity intact. Because now, the world knew what her sisters tried to forget. 2 days later, a prominent women's NGO reached out. They offered her a grant to open a small care center for girls who had lost their mothers. "We need more Chiamakas in this world," the director said. "Let's help you multiply your strength." With the funds, Chiamaka finally opened her own shop. It was small, painted cream and lavender, with a signboard that read, "Chai's Place. Care, hope for young girls." And this time, her name wasn't behind the curtain. It was on the door, where it belonged. In the months that followed, Chiamaka's life didn't suddenly become glamorous. There were no mansion gates or red carpets, but for the first time in her life, she walked with nothing pressing on her back. The world finally saw her, not because she demanded it, but because real truth has a way of finding its way to the light. Zara's essay didn't just spark applause, it healed something in Chiamaka that had long been buried under quiet sacrifice. It reminded her that she wasn't invisible, that what she gave her youth, her dreams, her strength, was never wasted. One afternoon, she sat outside her new center, watching 3 little girls play. A breeze brushed her cheek as Zara handed her a small handmade card. On it were 6 words scribbled in crayon. "I see you. I love you." Chiamaka smiled. "They edited me out of their story, but my niece wrote me back in. I didn't raise them to owe me anything. I raised them to become better. But now, I live for myself too. Quietly, proudly, with peace. Never erase the hands that lifted you. Success without gratitude is just noise, and those who suffer in silence often carry the deepest truths. Truth has a voice, and sometimes, that voice sounds like a child reading an essay. To every unseen guardian, quiet giver, and forgotten builder, this story is for you. Like, share, comment your story, remind the world who held the ladder, and never let sacrifice go forgotten.